This is Billy's Wish. Gil sat down on the couch with an exasperated sigh, picked up the remote and flipped through a few channels. With each subsequent channel, his frustration grew. There was nothing on TV. Every channel had those damn Pokemon or those Adventure Times. There was nothing there for a 60-year-old man to watch. There wasn't anything for anyone over 15 since The Wish. Freaking Billy. Become his mantra for the past 3 years. He spat, "Freaking Billy!" every time his boss gave him a raise in candy. Every time someone broke into a spontaneously yet perfectly choreographed song that revealed their most inner intentions. Every time his wife wanted to make love and he had to mash his flaccid weenie against her stomach. Billy was the cause of it all. Gil hated that boy so much. He hated the fact that he was now king in the universe. He hated that Billy had over $1 gazillion, which is now an actual unit of measurement. Most of all, he hated Billy for his first wish. No one knew how he got his hands on the magic genie lamp, but everyone knew what his first wish was. Billy looked at the towering djinn that had sprouted from the lamp and said those damnable words, "I wish the world is like I imagine it." Ever since then, the world had been warped to his perception of reality. Storks carried babies to houses of expecting parents. Fiendish anthropomorphic sea life arose from the ocean, from what was once its home. Sports teams were now populated with dogs who were professional quarterbacks, point guards, and goalies. To say Gil disliked that 8-year-old boy was a massive understatement. Gil angrily shut off the television and rose from his couch with a belabored groan. His back hurt from his long day at the fire station. There are only 3 types of occupations left in the world, and he was too out of shape to be an astronaut, too uneducated to be a doctor. That left only firemen. Luckily, most of his work today involved rescuing cats from trees and not running into raging infernos. But still, he missed his office job where he could sit on his ass all day and get paid for it. He went to the freezer and pulled out another box of silly juice. It had once been whiskey, but Billy's wish turned every alcohol into something called silly juice. Freaking Billy. He unscrewed the cap and downed half the bottle in a single slug. This would have been impossible with whiskey, but with silly juice was no problem. Gil stumbled across the room, instantly affected by the drink. Didn't make him drunk, just made him dizzy, hiccup a lot, and hallucinate pink elephants. Gil sat back down on the couch. He hoped that some part of his body or brain would remember the lingering response he used to have to whiskey and give him some long-forgotten buzz. It didn't. That was a shame. He really needs some of the old liquid courage to help him with what he was about to do. Gil leaned over and picked up an old service revolver that he had brought home with him from the war. It felt heavy in his hands, and more than anything, he just felt tired. He had nothing left. Freaking Billy. His wife had been taken from him. She spent the last few weeks coughing. Gladys waved off his concern, telling him it was just a cough or maybe allergies. By the time he managed to talk her into visiting the doctor, it was too late. She coughed viciously for a few minutes before pitching over dead. Doctor said it was the worst case of cooties they'd ever seen this side of the hemisphere. Gil flicked out the chamber and counted the bullets. There was 5, and that was more than enough. He only really needed 1. He really wished the then whiskey, now silly juice, had lowered his inhibition some. It would have been so much easier to put the barrel to his head if he wasn't drunk beforehand. He wasn't, but his mind was still made up. This was no longer a world for the old. This was no longer a place for the mature. This was no longer a world worth living in. Gil paused for a moment as if he decided what his final words should be. Chose them carefully. He smiled as he raised the revolver and put it under his chin. He fanned the hammer back and listened to the satisfying click. He took a deep breath, so deep his lungs expanded to twice the size of his body. Shouted out so the whole neighborhood could hear him. "Fuck this happy horse shit, world of magic and wonderment!" Gil squeezed the trigger. There was a bright flash, then pain. His death wasn't instantaneous like he had hoped. He was disoriented and his face hurt. Like a son of a bitch. Gil stumbled off the couch and rushed toward the bathroom mirror. He looked at himself in the mirror and felt a laugh bubble up from deep within him. He wasn't laughing at the humor of the situation, but at its hopelessness. His face was covered in ash. His eyes were bugged out. His hair was blown back like Daffy Duck in one of those old Looney Tunes cartoons. Billy had even stolen the sweet reprieve of death from him. Fucking Billy. This is Billy's World. Gil winced as he walked down the cracked street. The shattered and upended asphalt from the frequent impacts and eruptions that made walking anywhere a pain. But until Billy could get a license, he made sure no one else could drive. No one complained about it. There was no point in it anymore. Billy's power from the djinn's wish was absolute, and he would accept no opposition. People who argued with Billy and encroached in his safe zone found themselves splattered across the pavement with the simple snap of his fingers. 4 years had passed since Gil tried to kill himself. Now the world was much worse. He didn't think it could get worse than this delusional, Disney-fied world that had taken his wife from him. It all changed when Billy started to grow up. Before, you could get by if you embraced Billy's happy horse shit of a world of magic and wonderment and hoped that he believed in happy endings. But now something had changed. It seemed like overnight the world had warped and twisted into some new, terrible, macabre situation. Women's bust sizes had doubled, even tripled in some instances. causing massive back issues and immobilizing some of the unluckier ones. A few were even deformed into pixie-like children with cat or dog ears, who were so waif-thin that they could only get around by glomping onto the backs of other people. Men wandered around trying to defend their honor or generally acting like mopey high schoolers. Bodies littered the streets from pointless duels and battles between rival school factions. Before these honor duels, many boasted how the bonds of their friendship could help them overcome any opposition, only to quickly realize that friendship wasn't effective at protecting against bullets and knives. This world was much worse, and Gil knew why. Billy was 12, and he had just discovered anime. Gil had heard whispers of monstrosities that had been birthed from Billy's love of his fandom. These monsters, whose mere utterance of their name was punishable by death, had been sighted throughout the city, which Gil was walking through. Even the threat of these unholy creatures wasn't enough to keep Gil away from buying a case of Sparrow, beer, and sake. He'd been drinking silly juice for far too long, so the prospect of anything actually alcoholic in nature was enough to drive him out into Billy's world. He clutched the old revolver at his side as he wandered towards the nearest shop. Gil managed to make it about 3 blocks before he first encountered the monster. He just stepped out onto a piece of turned-up asphalt when it exploded hundreds of feet up into the air. He was thrown backwards onto his aging back, as the inexplicable smoke was cleared by a gust of wind that appeared randomly, as if on cue, alongside a watered-down electric guitar solo that seemed more like it was an out-of-touch parent trying to play their first metal solo. Gil got his first good look at the unholy creation. The fur on its body was dark red with black spines running along its back. It had a single white wing running along its back, and gnarled devil horns grew from its head that terminated into a golden and cracked angel halo. It looked like something a toddler would make by cutting random pieces of cartoon images and hastily gluing them together right down to the inexplicable bandage that randomly wrapped around its leg and tennis shoes on its feet. It opened its eyes, revealing black pupils, as it observed the decimated city around him. It opened its mouth, releasing billowing smoke, and spoke through its pointlessly sharp teeth.
Finally, I, Conus the Abomination, am free from the underworld. I was the product of an unholy union of an angel and a demon. My main goal on this earth is to track down and exterminate the Kyojin that murdered my beloved but lecherous grandfather, who raised me.
The abomination kept mindlessly going through its introduction, without even registering the fact that Gil had just shoved the barrel of a revolver into its open mouth while screaming. Gil shouted the thing's forbidden name as he pulled the trigger. "Fuck you, you wee-bite trash!" The revolver's hammer slammed down. A bullet exploded into the back of Conus the Abomination's head, pitching it backwards onto the street. There was a high-pitched ding like someone punching a synthesizer as coins erupted out of the anthropomorphic hedgehog's body. The words burbled through Conus' shredded mouth as he sloppily groped towards the golden rings living behind the bloody handprints.
My coin.
Gil stepped forward and pressed the revolver to the back of the wee-bite's head and delivered a coup de grace before it could even reach a coin. The bullet went through the abomination's head, and everything within a 5-foot radius was doused in blood and brain matter like a child setting off a ketchup bomb. Conus bounced up in the air before inexplicably phasing through the earth and disappearing into the ether. The old man rubbed at the bruise forming on his back as he groaned. He would have to spend the next day washing blood and brains out of every nook and cranny before he came close to ever feeling clean again. However, before any of that, Gil wanted to get good and drunk to try and forget all this. He continued walking towards the shop with a now blood-drenched $50 bill. At this point, he didn't care if he looked like a slasher movie victim. With half-naked girls running around and wee-bite abortions littering the earth, Gil didn't give a shit if he was bloody. In the end, it didn't really matter what Gil wanted, because this was Billy's world, and his lusts for violence and cliches hadn't been satiated yet. Gil had lied to himself and pretended that this was all a phase that the great and powerful Billy would grow out of. Now he wasn't sure if it would happen before the preteen destroyed the world. Gil didn't know what the words spoken by the people struggling to survive in Billy's world meant, but knew that it meant nothing good. Billy was begetting wee bites which would only plague the world with more death and destruction as he played out his pointlessly trite and gory revenge scenarios. Billy had become an edgelord. It was at this moment that Gil knew that everything was going to get a whole lot worse before it got any better. Gil looked up in the sky in horror as multiple black and red anthropomorphic hedgehogs of varieties rained from the sky. Some were carrying unwieldy great swords, while others struggled to aim at imaginary enemies with their crosshairs of their assault rifles, through their constantly weeping and bloody eyes. While each one was different than the others, they still looked like they had been pieced together by a child who had been huffing glue for the past 4 years. Gil flicked open the chamber of his revolver and counted the bullets. He had 4 bullets to make it through hundreds of OC monstrosities. Gil didn't know if they were coming for him, or if they were too absorbed in the generic backstories to even notice. Gil only knew one thing in Billy's world. One way or the other, he was gonna get drunk. Fucking Billy. This is Billy's Requiem.
Well, what do you have to say for yourself?
came out as more of a demand than anything else. Even with Billy's recent change of heart and decisions to be more humane, he still came out like a holier-than-thou dick. Gil thought about the ridiculousness of the situation. After 10 years of living under this Disney despot, this edgelord emperor, that he now fancied himself as an enlightened and educated. He wasn't going to rule the world anymore. He was going to save it. He sounded like one of those bullshit RPGs he tried to force on people a few years ago when he was really wrapped up in their stories. A massive global issue that could be solved by a few plucky children. He preached unconditional love and absolute forgiveness. He was their Lord and Savior. Billy had declared Amnesty Day to pardon all the infractions so that true forgiveness could be bestowed. This was his attempt at rebranding. Didn't matter to Gil. He was tired. He wanted to get it over with. He regarded Billy with tired eyes. The young man that sat in front of him looked nothing like he imagined. He imagined the would-be king like the heavy-set brat he had glimpsed on the news almost 10 years ago when all this first started. But now, Billy was tall, thin, and handsome. He wondered how much of that was due to the djinn's powers, and after seeing half a dozen hot pocket boxes littered around the room, he realized that it was all the genie's doing. The djinn lounged behind the altar. It was a towering behemoth that powered all of Billy's fancies and whims. It entered a dormant state a few years back after some people tried to worship it and offer their own supplications to it. It still responded to his master's requests, but now it was almost catatonic to the world. Gil was woken from his daze by the man before him, motioning him forward. Gil stepped forward with an exasperated sigh. 6 years had passed since he had committed the unforgivable act of killing one of Billy's OCs. The next 6 years were spent in an alcohol-induced feud that Gil could remember bits and pieces of. Remember running, screaming, and drinking, surrounded by the world of blood and edginess. His public execution of Conus had resulted in him being branded with enemy of the state, at least in Gil's eyes. Gil had managed to remain a fugitive, mainly due to people's indifference and the fact that Billy had completely forgotten he had created Conus within hours of making it, before the floodgates broke. It was his realization that Gladys would have been 70 years old a few months back that forced Gil to put down the bottle and actually look at the world around him. In the 10 years that had passed, Gil had already forgotten all the small intricacies of her body, like her smile, laugh, and frustrated sighs. It was a sobering thought, and Gil sobered up accordingly.
Have you come here for amnesty, my child?
He spoke those words without a trace of awareness. He didn't think about the fact that Gil had been alive for almost 50 years before Billy had ever been born. Billy truly saw himself as a messianic figure, and all the people in this world were his children to be guided like sheep. And Gil thought for a moment. He could probably grovel for a moment and beg for forgiveness, then walk back into the world with a clean slate. Would have been easy. He could have absolution and go back to living life without really losing anything in the process. Gil didn't want it easy, however.
Eat of dick.
There was a brief crack in Billy's facade where the beatific and benevolent ruler temporarily revealed the petulant and self-entitled child underneath he had always been. Despite being an adult now, Billy had never grown beyond that of a child because no one told him he was wrong. He never known what it was like to have someone judge them. He was sheltered from anything and everything. The facial expression quickly shifted back to the messianic one. He asked,
If you aren't here to receive pardon and forgiveness for your crime, why are you here? I don't have a lot of time to listen to your imagined grievances with me. I'm busy trying to fix this broken...
I'm not here to beg for forgiveness. I don't think I've done anything wrong. You're the one who's in the wrong here. I'm here to tell you that you need to stop. You're not helping this world. You're gonna kill us all if you keep doing what you're doing.
Why say that? You must remember what this world was like before I was given this burden. You remember people starving and suffering. How can I stop when I have the ability to solve all these problems? I have a moral obligation to help my people. It's easy to belittle someone when you're doing nothing yourself. Do you not realize that I've solved problems like world hunger?
You didn't solve world hunger. You just made crops grow in size. Sure, a dozen tomatoes can now feed a small village by the side of the horse. In order to grow that large, they're sapping the soil of all their nutrients. It's a temporary fix to a massive problem. People may not go to bed hungry tonight. What happens the next harvest? The one after that, populations are growing. We won't have enough to sustain them all in a couple of years. What then?
I just wish for more nutrients in the soil. More people require larger foods. Easy fix. More nutrients, larger foods. There's a drought? Just summon a storm to end it. I can fix anything with just a few words and a wish.
What nutrients are needed to grow corn? You even know if a country is well equipped to handle a torrential downpour to grow crops? Do you realize what you're doing to the ecosystem with a sudden change in their weather patterns? Desert life isn't equipped to handle that. There'll be flooding and washouts. I don't think you do. You don't know anything about...
Billy changed the topic.
It's easy to complain in a world free of pain. Forget how many people suffered with degrading bodies and debilitating diseases. What right do you have to tell me how to do my job?
Gil blew out an exhausted sigh. He knew this was coming. There was no way to completely eliminate pain, so Billy chose to mask it. A slight adjustment to the receptors in the brain resulted in an increased output of dopamine. Pain was still there, but now there was a pleasant buzz humming throughout your body all the time. Gil constantly felt nauseous, like his stomach was about to drop out of his abdomen. He had headaches that felt like a barbed wire tightening around his brain. His heart was beating so fast that he thought it would explode. Didn't matter, though. With the dopamine, he felt more at ease, despite being incredibly unhealthy. The only thing that kept him moving around was the realization that something was wrong here. The older you got, or the more pain you were in, the higher your dopamine production. People's lives weren't improved. They were rendered complacent. Billy didn't know about the results of his tinkering on the human body.
You can't eliminate pain, as it's necessary to warn our bodies of danger. Covering it up with a hide doesn't help people. Covering it up with a hide doesn't help. I've seen people laying in bed all day, too sick to move, unable to feel the bed sores creeping up their bodies. It sucks getting old and hurting all the time, but that ache and discomfort help prevent us from wearing out our joints by running and dancing. You're not a doctor. You don't know the side effects of what you're doing. Have you ever seen how some people are acting now? Past one guy on the way here that was just looking at the sky and laughing. He did that for 5 minutes before mumbling something, incoherent and wandering off. People are acting like freaking loons with all these chemicals raging inside them.
Maybe you're a masochist. It doesn't give you the right to try and prevent other people from experiencing a life free of pain. Man was probably so full of life that he couldn't help but laugh at his good fortune. Do you not understand what joy is? Add is that? You're blinding yourself with nostalgia and thinking everything was perfect back before I was given this gift.
I don't. The world was terrible, but we lived through it and adapted.
Do your nostalgia glasses shield you from all the world's problems that were present in the old world? We're not just talking about famine and suffering. There's also social inequality and racism. I solved that too. There's no more racism, sexism, ageism, and everyone is treated equally. But do you miss that? Do you miss having status over other people just because they're a different race or sex from you? Do you even realize how hard it is to fix so many systematic problems? What right do you have to judge me?
You didn't solve racism. Decreeing that people can no longer be racist just resulted in them being racist in a less detectable manner. Employers still don't hire women or minorities. They just justify it with empty BS based on around their stereotypes, but not directly implying them. There's thousands of jobless men and women who aren't hired due to their perceived lack of work ethic. You didn't solve racism, you just changed its name. People are still being treated differently, just other people are using different approaches to disenfranchise them.
You think this job is easy? So many people depending on me to rescue them. Do you think you would do it better?
Billy was ranting, and for a brief moment, Gil was worried that he was going to be vaporized on the spot. He had heard of it being done before, but at this point Gil didn't mind. He had said his piece. Billy had claimed to fix the world, but he'd only made it worse. The rapidly shifting climates had devastated populations who were not equipped for heavy rain, and almost a third of the population was so whacked out of their gourds, they appeared almost psychotic.
No, I just think you should know what
You think you can handle the burdens I face in a day-to-day life? You wouldn't last a day dealing with everything I have to do for you people. You think I want to solve each of your crises for myself? I wish you had powers for an hour. I wish you had my powers for an hour, just so you know what it's like and how difficult it is.
Billy regretted those words as soon as he said them. The djinn operated very literally, and always required the utmost caution when voicing the phrase, I wish. The air shifted, and the dormant djinn's eyes lit up in response to Billy's unintentional wish. It happened so quickly that Gil barely had time to suck in a breath before the universe opened up to him in its entirety. In that instant, Gil was omnipotent and omniscient. Gil had Billy's powers for the previous moment, and he knew what had to be done. Billy began to shout,
Djinn, help me! I demand that you give me back!
Gil imagined the djinn dispersing into the air, like a dry fart, and watched his reality unfold and acquiesced to his desire. The djinn opened its eyes in confusion, as its entirety unraveled like a ball of yarn that had been kicked down the stairs. In the blink of an eye, the djinn was nothing more than particles being carried away by air currents. All the power the djinn possessed evaporated under its new master's whim, leaving Gil with this momentary ability. In an hour, that would be gone. Billy could only watch in horror as his only means of reclaiming his power was disintegrated, with a poor choice of words and a thought. Billy's grand experiment crumbled away. Billy whimpered.
What are you going to do? Everything I worked for, everything I built to be undone in a few days. Are you proud of yourself? Are you happy yourself?
Gil wasn't happy. He saw how everything unfolded in front of him and realized how bad it all was. Those things he had brought against Billy were just the tip of the iceberg. He couldn't fix all the problems caused if he had lived to be 1,000 years. The ecosystem was completely depleted of all its resources. A third of the population was swallowed up by dopamine-induced psychosis, and more was slipping away. Even if Billy was a terrible leader, his absence would still create a power vacuum that would result in bloodshed and socioeconomic destabilization. People had grown with Billy being a guiding force in their life, and when that disappeared, chaos would swallow them up. Gil saw everything, and he would have wept if he thought it would change anything. It was too late. Fucking Billy. It's all too late. Billy sniveled.
I was right, wasn't I? I tried to fix it, but it was too broke to fix. It's not my fault that it all ended up like this. It was so much worse than when I started. I did the best I could.
Gil was lost in his thoughts that he didn't even hear Billy's platitudes. He didn't know what to do. He didn't want any of this. He was so tired. He just wanted to rest. He wanted it all to end. He closed his eyes and wished. And that is the end of the Billy trilogy. That is how it goes. I think it was pretty good. This thumbnail was obviously brought to you by the wonderful Day Offer. It's going to have all 3 of these stories in it. I did some stuff with the first 2 stories, and this one made it a little bit better, improved some things. But I honestly hope you guys did enjoy. I think it was a great story series. I love the concept of this child who grows older and is like becoming edgier, and he has phases and the world's being affected by it. I think it's a really good concept, and I obviously want to thank Travis. Please go check out his stuff in the description. Everything will be in there. He's a great person. He's prolific. He's a great author. It Breathes, It Bleeds, It Breeds is a great story as well. He's wonderful. He's a great person. He's talked to me throughout this. I did ask him if he ever to make a 4th one. He obviously said he wouldn't, but this is a great trilogy. I really enjoyed it for a troll pasta. Next week, we'll be back to just classic troll pastas. Probably some, lost episode stuff. Who knows? Jeff the Killer Week is coming up soon. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this trilogy, and I'll see you on the next assignment. Peace out.